Hi, my name is Eric Hailstone. I've been teaching at Yamaha worship events for the last 10, 12 years. The first one I did was up in the Seattle area. When I first got there, I set up a little booth. It's like a table with 3 or 4 items on it. And the promoter comes up to me, it's about 9:45 in the morning. Eric, what would you think about teaching a class, a guitar class? I said, man, I'd love to, I love guitar. When? He goes, in 10 minutes. I grab a guitar Yamaha just sent me, walk into the room, no preparation at all. There's 50 people in the room. I may never see these people again. What can I tell them that if they do the rest of their life will help them to become better musicians and better guitar players? Off the top of my head, I came up with these ideas that have been the basis of this class now for the last dozen years. The first thing I thought of was, every time you learn a song, learn it in the key of C, A, G, E, and D. And a lot of you I know are familiar with this cage system of learning scales up and down the neck. This is kind of based on that, but really what's going on here is C, A, G, E, and D are all first position open string chords. When you're playing acoustic guitars, particularly in a worship band, you want as many open strings as possible. So by using these first position chords, that will kind of guarantee that's happening. If you're playing bar chords like this, like listen to this G chord. That's a really different experience and a different kind of sound than this. In most modern worship, the acoustic guitar is kind of the main event. You can have worship with one person with an acoustic guitar going up and playing these songs. Most worship songs, not all, but most of them are based around 4 chords. Like if I'm in the key of G, we would call G the 1 chord. And then we count up playing scale notes. 1, 2, 3, 4. We play a C, that's called the 4 chord. You play 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. D, that's the 5 chord. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. E minor, that's a 6 chord and it's minor. Some of you may be familiar with this Nashville system where they number just that way, 1, 4, 5, 6, and then you just write the key in that you want it to be in. I'm going to take one song and I'm going to take you through these different keys. And as we go in, one of the things we're going to look for are chord voicings that sound particularly good for this style of music. So the song we're going to start off with is called Here I Am to Worship. And the song originally is in the key of D. And if you just got the sheet music out and looked at it, you would see this chord going to the 5 chord, which is A, and then to E minor. And then it's going to repeat D, which is the 1, A, which is the 5, and then it's going to go to G. And that's the 5. The first thing you want to look for is in each key, there are certain chords that are special to that key, and you're going to know some of them. So as an example, instead of playing D, in modern worship, often what you'll see is a chord called D2. Or D sus2. And what we're doing is we're taking the 3rd of the chord, in this case it's an F sharp note, and we're lowering it down to E. Now, this gives us another open string, so that's real jangly. That's something we want, that's an advantage. When we go to the A chord, maybe we do the same thing there. So we're going to take our finger off this C sharp and play a B natural. This chord becomes an A2. That sounds good. That could work. So I'd say this is an improvement already. E minor, let's play an E minor 7. It's a more modern sound. One of the things I notice when I play this E minor 7 is it's very similar looking to this D2 chord. So I just move one finger and then play more strings and I come up with the E minor 7. It also is very close to a chord, an A voicing. In fact, if I move my finger from here on the A string over to the D string, same fret. Now I have a chord called A7 sus4. Check this out. The D2 chord, the A7 sus4. All I'm doing is moving my first finger to the 4th string. When I go to the E minor 7, I just move it over the A string, the 5th string. So now I have this high open E and this D on the D chord. On the A chord, I have those same 2 notes. In fact, on all 3 of these chords, I have those same 2 notes. And this is an arranging technique. It's called common tone principle. The idea is you move from chord to chord, and if you can, you keep notes that are common in each of the chord under your fingers. So it ends up making really, really beautiful voicings. And it creates this familiar sound because it is the same thing. So the second half of the tune, D, we're switching to this D sus2. We're playing A7 sus4, common tone on the same top 2 strings. Now, instead of going to E minor, we're going to a G chord. Normally you would play G like this, but we're going to change it up a little bit. You can put your little finger on the high E string on the 3rd fret. Your 3rd finger you can leave because it's been there all the time, so it's on the B string on the 3rd fret. Your 2nd finger will come all the way across to the low E string on the 3rd fret. Normally we'd have our 1st finger playing this B natural note. Let's just take that off. So now we have a chord that's made up of nothing but G's and D's. So there's no 3rd. So it's you would call this G5, but it's a really open sound. When we're going from all these common tones, when we finally get to this G5, you can hear the upper notes finally change. So common tones are great, they're really familiar. You hear it as it's being played and you go, wow, that's really cool. And then when it's finally time to change, it's like a big relief. So this is a great time to play this chord. All right, so we have this G5 chord. It's really open. And it finally gives us resolution after sitting on all these common tones. One of the nice things about this is my 1st finger, you see it out here doing nothing. It can add notes really easily, and most of them will be on the 2nd fret here. So G5, adding an A, this is a 2. So now we'd call this chord G2. Or I can add an E natural, or both. So if I'm playing this, light of the world, you stepped out of the darkness, open my eyes, let me see. We have more time on this chord than the other chords, so you can actually play little fills. Another thing you can do on this particular chord is this note here, with my little finger on the top E string is a G. I can lower that to an F sharp. And that all fits in the key, so it's really beautiful. You may already have a collection of chords that you know in these keys, and you should try those out. So I'm just going to show you a few that are part of my vocabulary. Here's a fairly simple chord, like we go to E minor. I'm going to place my first finger on the B string on the 3rd fret. That's a D note. I'm going to reach across with my second finger on the D string on the 4th fret, that's F sharp. I'm going to play the low E note. That's an E minor 9th. And check it out. A whole lot of open strings, really jangly, really beautiful harmony. It fits the tune great. I can add my little finger up here on the 5th fret of the high E string. Now it becomes an E minor 11. This starts to sound like really fancy jazzy harmony, and it is, but it's not hard to play and it really fits the song. Now here's a chord that's a little harder. So I'm barring with my first finger across the 2nd fret, starting on the 5th string, across all the strings, all of them except the low E. My second finger plays this D note on the 3rd fret of the B string. My little finger is playing G, and that's the 5th fret of the D string. So the nice thing about that is you can strum everything. It's going to take a little practice to get it so it's right under your fingers. Don't be afraid to experiment. So as an example, I'm going to play a D chord. This is right off of the sheet music. And I'm just going to start moving notes around. So I'm going to put my little finger here. That's called a sus4. Now, the one thing you want to do, like this is a really cool sounding chord, and I would definitely use this somewhere, but check it against the melody of the tune. So the first note of the melody is F sharp. So if I play, light of the world, light, with this G on top, that's clashing. That's like a half step right against each other. So great chord, but in this particular song, probably not the one you want to use. If I go up another half step, pretty tense, probably not something you're going to use. If I go up one more, now we're back to playing roots and fifths. This can work. This particular chord might be a stretch that you don't want to make. So, we have to weigh those things out too. It's like, just because you can play something doesn't mean you can play it in a particular moment. So you got to check that out. That's how you go about experimenting. Go to the next string. Pretty tense. Go up to the 5th fret. That is pretty common harmony for this kind of chord, for this kind of song. So it might be one you want in your vocabulary. Let's go up one more note. So on the B string, we'll play the E note on the 5th fret. So now you have a chord called D major add 2. And this would definitely fit harmonically in this particular song, this kind of song as well. Let's go the opposite way. We'll lower. So now we have a major 7. And if I were playing a jazzy version of this song, a major 7 would be great. I probably wouldn't use it in this worship context. If we go down one more, we end up with a dominant 7. Great chord, but it's not going to work as the 1 chord in this song. It just adds too much tension. Now, one thing I want to point out is sometimes you'll have a sound that you hear and in context it doesn't sound good at all. So if I go down to the last fingered note, this is an A, and if I raise that up to A sharp, light of the world, you can hear against the melody, it doesn't work at all. But check out, this is the same chord with this moving line starting on A. And in this context, that kind of motion works great. So sometimes you'll find something, it doesn't work in the particular song you're using, but it's cool and you'll want to put it aside for use later on. The chorus, so here I am to worship, D, that's the 1. Here I am to bow down, that's A, that's the 5 chord. Then we go back to D. Here I am to say, you're my God, G, that's the 4 chord. Then all of this is going to repeat. You're altogether lovely, altogether worthy, altogether wonderful to me. So the first thing I'm going to try is 2 chord. Here I am to worship, here I am to, and I might try playing it here. When I go to the 5 chord, I'm going to try voicing my chord like this. So this is still an A chord, but what I've done is I've put a C sharp into the bass. C sharp is the 3rd in the key of A, in the chord of A. What I like about this is you had this half-step motion in the bass from D to A over C sharp. And either of these voicings, playing it here or playing this barred version, I think work really, really well. The A you can voice like this. I'm going to just place my first finger across the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th strings on the 2nd fret. That's an A chord. And then my 3rd finger on the A string, on the 5th string, on the 4th fret, that adds the C sharp. My little finger, if I want, I can voice it this way. That puts the E up on top here. And that's just another choice. This works fine as well. So at this point, we go back to D, but that sounds kind of pedestrian to me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play a D chord, but I'm going to put F sharp in the bass. And then the next chord is G. I'm going to play the same G we played before. So from the D, with F sharp in the bass, we have this half-step motion. to the G. Using this G5 voicing, our first finger is open and available to play little fills here as well. So now we've already got a bunch of concepts. We have these chords that are called two chords. We have the common tone principle. Now we've introduced a slash chord. We're putting the third in the bass, and we've done it twice now. So we have D going to A with C sharp in the bass, so that's a half step motion. Then we go to D with F sharp in the bass, going to G. So let's compare the two. The original chorus, here I am to worship, here I am to bow down, here I am to say, you're my God. Or, here's our new version, here I am to worship, here I am to bow down, here I am to say, you're my God. So it's much more interesting harmonic motion by being able to put these thirds in the bass. So I'd recommend learning how to play these chords. This version here is really easy to move and play in other keys. This one, if you're playing with your fingers, you have the advantage of being real specific and playing certain notes, specific notes, exactly. If you're playing with a pick, it's harder to mute out notes like that. So this particular voicing, when you start moving it up, I would switch to this fingering. And this one, there's only one note you need to mute out. That's this A string. I will tell you, I remember when I learned this chord, and it took me a couple of months to get so it was as easy to play as kind of normal open string chords. But you will get it. It's not that hard, it just takes time. One of the things I love about this song is, unlike most worship songs, it has a bridge as well. And so that gives us another fun place to go. So the bridge goes A, which is the 5 chord, to D, that's the 1 chord, to G. All right. I never knew how much it costs to see my sins upon that cross. I never. So let's try some of the things we've already done. So instead of just jumping from A to D, let's go to D over F sharp, and I think that's a good substitution. Going to G, starting with this G5 chord we learned earlier, moving this note from G down to F sharp. I never knew how much it costs. Might try A2. And so far, all of these are working. Sometimes I will pick a chord just out of instinct, or because the shape of it reminds me of something else. And in this particular case, when I see this D over F sharp, I know this other chord. It's a B minor chord. And they're so similarly shaped that I just want to try it. I never knew how much it cost. To me, it sounds great. And as it turns out, there's a reason, there's a theoretical reason why it works. And let me see if I can explain this. There's this concept called relative major, relative minor. And the idea is, for every major key, there is a minor. So in the case of D major, there is a chord that is lower by a minor third, and on the guitar you just place your fingers in a row, 4 fingers, and it'll take you to that place. So it turns out it's B. So B minor shares the same scale notes as D major. So oftentimes you can replace a D major with a B minor. So that's what we're doing in this case. So the concept is relative minor, and it works in reverse. If you have a song that is a minor key, oftentimes you can replace it with its relative major. All right, so now our voicings are A, either A major or A sus2, to B minor, to G5. You could try the A7 sus4. I never knew how much it cost. So in my church, when we were doing this song, oftentimes we'd use this part as a kind of meditative time. People would have prayer circles. Somebody might take a solo. So we'd be on this for quite a while. And I think often when you vamp on a section for quite a while, it's really nice to introduce something new to break away from it. And I discovered this clearly by accident. So let me play it, and then I'll explain what I'm doing. So, I never knew how much it costs. See my sins upon that cross. I never knew how much it costs to see my sins upon that cross. So instead of going to G, I've gone to a C chord. And there's a variety. You could play a stock C major, you could play C2, you could play C2 with an F sharp on top. It's really beautiful, still fits the harmony, but it's a little startling. So what you do, we're in the key of D. Normally, if you went to a C note in the key of D, it would be a C sharp. We're lowering it a half step, so it'll be a C natural. And this will work in any key. So if we were in the key of E, you would go to a D chord. Now, I mentioned this idea of relative major, relative minor. I remember hearing a version of this song where instead of going back to the chorus in major, they switched to minor. So, upon that cross, so here I am to worship, here I am to bow down, here I am to say, you're my God, you're altogether lovely. So, in my opinion, when you go to the minor like this, you introduce a whole other kind of emotional aspect to the song. It seems more tender, more melancholy, more profound in certain ways. And then also, if you play this a couple of times and then go back to the major, it gives it this real triumphant point. So check this out. Here I am to worship, here I am to bow down, here I am to say, you're my God, you're altogether lovely, altogether worthy, altogether wonderful to be. Here I am to worship, here I am to bow down, here I am to say. So that's the point when we go back to major, and you could hear how it brightens up from the minor. And again, kind of a beautiful way to present this chorus in the last part of the song. For a moment, let's go back to this bridge. And I just want to grab some random chords that are in my vocabulary. So for the A, if you come up here and play an A bar chord, and then just unhinge your finger from the top notes, you've got these high open strings. And remember, playing acoustic guitar in worship band, one of the things that you want is as many open strings as possible. So that gives you a way of adding open strings. You also can take away fingers. So I'm starting here, but I'm going to take away my third finger, my little finger. What I want to end up with is that these notes that are inside this chord, but I'm playing the open A string and the top. The top two strings are open now that I've taken my first finger away. Don't be afraid to look for random voicings and put them in your vocabulary. So now we're going to take this song, C, A, G, E, and D. We've just done it in D. Let's take it over to the key of G. So the primary chords in the original key are D, that's the 1, A, that's the 5, E minor, that's the 6, G, that's the 4 chord. So we have 1, 4, 5, and 6 minor. In the key of G, 1 is G, 4 is C, 6 minor is E minor, the 5 chord is D. So if we go right off the sheet music, light of the world, you stepped out of the darkness, open my eyes, let me see. So first thing, G, let's start with this chord. We called it G5. All the same things apply. If you're here long enough, you can add notes. You can pull fingers away and see if these notes work against the chord. When we go to D, the first thing I'm going to try is this D2 chord. You might try a sus4 and then resolve it. Light of the world. Plus, when you play that sus4 chord, we have this common tone principle. Top two notes are the same with both chords. Go to A minor. We might change this chord to an A minor 7. And if we want to keep with this common tone principle, we might add that G note back. That's actually the 7. So we have that G note consistent with all three chords. With the first chord, the G chord, and the D chord, we have G and D on top. If you want, on the D chord, you can resolve that note and then go back. The second time around in this progression, instead of playing A minor, you go to a C chord instead of playing C like this, we'll play it like this. You might want to add the E note back there. You still have these open strings where you can play little fills. So that's basically the verse in the key of G. Light of the world, you stepped out of the darkness. Open my eyes, let me see. You can drop the G down to F sharp. Beauty that fades. That's D with F sharp in the bass. This heart adore you, A minor. G, D with F sharp in the bass. Go to E, but put E in the bass. All right, the chorus, normal chorus in the key of G. Here I am to worship, here I am to, that's 1, going to 5, to D, back to 1, then to the 4 chord C. So let's try this G5 chord. D, let's keep these notes on top. We put F sharp in the bass. If you want, you can switch, put F sharp on the high E string as well. I think I like keeping the G. The next chord is G, but let's go to G with a B in the bass. And then we go to the C2. So now we have the same half-step motion going from the first chord to the second chord, and then from the third chord to the fourth chord. So I should caution you, everything that I'm showing you right now, in my classes at this point, I would always ask people, how many of you are the music directors or worship leaders? And half the people would raise their hand. So I would then say, when you go back to your church, you could take all these ideas and start doing them immediately because you're the one arranging the stuff and telling other people what to play. But if you're not, and you're playing one of these songs this Sunday, don't start doing these things without talking to whoever is in charge, because you could have some major harmonic clashes, and you don't want that. Like a lot of these putting thirds in the bass, you definitely don't want to do that unless the bass player is also doing it with you. If you're leading worship on your own, it's something I do often in small groups, then you're free to do it. So again, just to recap our chorus, G5, and you have all these notes available. D over F sharp. You can play D2 on top, just a normal D chord with an F sharp. You can have G on top, so it's a D sus4. When you go to the G chord, put B in the bass. So we have all these common tones on top. And that will cover the chorus of this song in the key of G. Now, let's look at the bridge. So, here I am to worship, we're in the key of G. We're on the bridge. The bridge starts on the 5 chord, which in this key would be D. I never, goes to the 1 chord, G, to the 4 chord, which is C. I never knew how much it costs to see my sins upon that cross. So let's go from D to G, but put B in the bass, to C. And again, we're picking these voicings, D sus4. So we have G and D on top. This is our common tone principle. You know, my parents paid really good money to learn this stuff at Berklee College of Music, so you're getting a lot of free stuff here. D sus4, G over B, C2. So let's go back. In D, when we did this for the second chord, we went to a minor chord. So we replaced the G chord with the relative minor. So in the key of D, we went from D to B minor. We're in the key of G, it'll be E minor. And we had all these cool voicings that we had previously learned. Just pick the ones that at first are most familiar with you or the easiest. I never knew how much it costs. Or, and this is important, pick chords that you think will fit with the ensemble you're playing, the people you're playing with. So I like this E minor quite a bit. I also liked the G with the B in the bass. It's not as radical a change. But take your pick. I like them both. All right, so that basically covers the kind of changes we would do to this bridge. Now remember, this is a part that's going to be repeated a lot, and our dramatic ending, our dramatic change, we used a major chord that was down a whole step from the key. So we're in the key of G. A whole step down will be F. And normally, when I think of F, that's the first chord I grab, this bar chord or that version. But keeping with this idea of open strings, I'm going to give you a couple of chord voicings. So I'm going to take my middle finger, put it on the first fret of the B string. My first finger is going to play the first fret of the low E string. I'm going to not play the A string. Even though it's part of the key, it just gets too thick down here, but I am going to play everything else. Now the top note, the E note, in this context, it's an E minor, or pardon me, it's a major seventh. And it totally works, but here's an alternative. Reach up with your little finger and grab that G. And I'm going to give you a smaller version of this chord as well. So the smaller version is, put your first finger on the first fret of this B string, reach up with your third finger on the D string, the fourth string, play the third fret. So this chord we would call an F major 9. And you could also add G up here. So you can hear they're similar, it's just one voices that low F. So let me put it in context. I never knew how much it costs. Dramatic ending. See my sins upon that cross. There's the smaller version of the chord. Now, if we go from here back to the verse and we want to play that relative minor, here I am to worship, here I am to bow down, here I am to say, you're my God. So the relative minor is E minor. And any of these voicings will work. Here I am to bow down. I'm going to a D minor here, then C, that's the 4. One of the things that you can do with these chords in this position is you can do walk downs from one chord to another. Well, I could do it from here. And it's working because I'm moving from the 6 minor, D with F sharp in the bass, to G, or in the case of the C, to G with B in the bass. That's like just a simple scale motion, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So another concept. Again, something I would be doing if I were playing, leading worship by myself. If I'm in the context of a band, you're not going to be playing these low lines. In fact, you're not going to be playing with your fingers probably. You're going to be... All right, that covers the key of G. We're going to do one more. So let's do E. When I think of E, you play this down in this position. To play these B chords and these F sharp chords, you almost always end up having to play bar chords in some way, shape, or form. That's not ideal. The alternate to that, I think of Open the Eyes of My Heart by Paul Baloche, which is this big E5 chord. And then the moment I think of it, I think, oh gosh, don't do it. It's been done so much. But sometimes things that we think of as cliches, things that are very familiar, can be really, really effective in used in a different context. So Paul's song goes from an E5 to a B chord with all these open strings on top, and it has a low E against this B chord. So this brings on a new concept. The next chord is A, the same 2 open strings on top. So again, one of the things we're looking for is lots of open strings. So we've got them here. Common tone principle, we've got that. Now we have this new principle called pedal tone. And it comes from classical organ music when the organist would stomp down a pedal and hold a note while he changed chords. So the idea is I'm going from an E chord to a B chord. I'm keeping the E in the bass. I go to the A chord or the F sharp and I keep E in the bass. So new concept, pedal tones. So check it out. Light of the world. Now normally we would go to an F sharp here, and you can, if you want to break away from that pedal tone. But I'm going to suggest that you don't do that. So you just go to this A chord. A and F sharp are relative major and relative minor, so they function the same way. And And I might do this as the introduction of this song before the whole band comes in. Light of the world, you stepped out of the darkness, open my eyes. Now the second time I come around and I go to the A, I'm going to go to this voicing, or this voicing, where I am breaking away from the pedal tone. That's the first time. So you have all this common stuff, and finally the bass note changes. And that's really satisfying. It's like the familiar parts with the common tones and the pedal tones feels really good. And when it finally changes, it's like the aha moment. Let's go ahead and move to the chorus. So here I am to worship. The normal chords are the 1 chord to the 5 chord. Here I am back to the 1 chord. Say you're my God, the 4 chord. So let's come back up here. Here I am to worship. Here I am to bow down. Here I am to say, you're my God. So what I've done is I've continued to use the pedal tone. We'll go from E5 to B over E, back to the E5, and then finally break to A, where we're putting the A bass note in. Or we can use the other technique that we use, which is go from E, get rid of the pedal tone, go to B with the 3rd in the bass, D sharp, go to E with the 3rd in the bass, and then you go to A2. Sounds really good to me. I would use it again in the context of a band. You want to make sure that you're the one doing the arranging, or that you've checked with that person, so you're all doing the same thing. The bridge goes to a 5 chord in the key of E, that's B. Then goes to the 1 chord, which is E, and then the 4 chord, which is A. We have been using this relative minor substitution, so instead of going to the 1 chord, we're going to the 6 chord. So from B, that's the 5 chord, the 6 chord is C sharp minor, and then to A. Now, since we started using Open the Eyes, My Heart, this Paul Baloche song, as kind of our template for these voicings, in his song, he's got a bridge that uses these voicings where you have these constant open strings on top, and he plays the 5 chord like this, the 1 chord like that, and when he goes to C sharp, he plays like this. So, I never knew how much it cost. See my sin. So, because I'm aware of that, I've tried it, and I think it sounds great. The open strings. So that's what I'm going to use. See my sins upon that cross. And again, this section of the tune is one that often will repeat a lot, and so we used a dramatic change to get ready to go back to the chorus. And that dramatic change is achieved by going to a chord that is a whole step below the tonic. The tonic is E, that's the key of the song. A whole step down is D. You can play it like this with these open strings on top. You can bar the whole thing, or you can come down to here. So, I never knew how much it costs to see my sins upon that cross. I never knew how much it costs to see my sins upon that cross. Or never knew how much it costs to see my sins upon that cross. Just a more traditional chord. If we wanted to play the chorus with the relative minor, we would go to C sharp. Here I am to worship, to B minor. Here I am to bow down, to A. Say that you're my God. So to create a moving bass line, I go from A to E over G sharp to F sharp. You're altogether lovely. Back to C sharp. Altogether worthy. Altogether wonderful to me. Now we go back to E major. Here I am to worship. Here I am to bow down. Here I am to say, you're my God. And you can try various combinations of these pedal tones, of these bass lines moving in half steps, because we're using these chord voicings where we're putting the thirds in the bass of these major chords. So just by going through these three keys, we have come up with these voicings, sus2s, 5 chords, no thirds, thirds in the bass, common tone principle on top, pedal tones. So you have, right there, you have numerous arranging techniques that you can apply. And again, this particular song, like most worship songs, uses the 1 chord in the key of G, that's G, 4 chord, that's C, 5 chord, that's D, E minor, that's the 6th chord. We've also used A minor, which is a 2 chord. Our dramatic ending chord, or dramatic transition chord, in a major key, go down a whole step. So from D, go down to C. In the key of G, go down to F. Use as many open strings as possible. And the last thing I want to say is, by doing all of these things, taking songs and moving them into these various keys, C, A, G, E, and D, you're using as many open string possibilities as you can, and that puts you in the perfect position to use a capo to move your arrangements around to different keys. I swear I have seen people who play everything in the key of G using these voicings, but then they will capo up to get to other voicings. So whenever you use a capo, by the way, play with it. Find out where the best position is. It's usually right up against the fret. I like capos that have an adjustment on them that allows me to set the tension. So I'm now playing in B flat by capoing at the 3rd fret. I'm using voicings in the key of G. If you look at people like James Taylor, acoustic guitar players, singer-songwriters, often you'll see them using a capo to get these voicings. All right, I hope that's been really helpful. We'll see you in the next video.